Go to Rhode Island, you will find what appears to just be a normal looking farmhouse. And this farmhouse harbors a dark secret that goes beyond the alleged hauntings it has become infamous for. Yes, I'm talking about the Conjuring house. Conjuring house has been a speculated thing for a long time. Did Ed Warren over-exaggerate what actually happened in the Conjuring house? Is the Conjuring house actually haunted? And yes, it is up for sale right now. It was due to be auctioned off on Halloween Day and open bidding happening. But the mortgage was bought up by another mortgage holder. So now they got to start the foreclosure process all over again. So we'll see what happens with that. But in today's video, the Conjuring house, was it actually and still to this day, a very haunted house? Or was it a hoax devised by Ed Warren and Lorraine Warren, just become famous and, became even more famous? Because we all know that they are the most famous paranormal investigators of all time. Most famous and infamous in a lot of ways, because there's been a lot of controversies surrounding the Warrens and things that they've said, and all kinds of contradicting things from actual people that were in these houses. And the Conjuring house is no different. It is by far the most heavily speculated house that people say it was over-exaggerated. People say, oh, the parents said this and the Warrens said this, but it's all a matter of perspective. So is it over-exaggerated? It very well could be, but when you see something and I see something, chances are our descriptions of what that is, they may have some similarities, but they're going to be completely different. So that's something to keep in mind as we dive further into this. And if the Conjuring house was actually, as haunted back then, and the activity is so bad, though, they say that's why nobody can stay there year-round, because there's so much activity, and people say it's demonic there. Now, is it actually haunted? I've never spent any time in the Conjuring house. I would love to go there sometime and do a really in-depth investigation and see what's actually there. They say that there's a trickster spirit that actually lives there and things along that line. But until I actually go there myself, then I don't really know what could actually be there. And the whole Bathsheba thing, if you've seen the first movie, Bathsheba was a real person, though. That character is not made up. Just kind of the story behind her is made up, and we're diving into that in today's video as well. But there's some other things to be said. In 2013, audiences were introduced to one of the scariest films in cinema history, getting an extra shot of terror, courtesy, and claims on true events. And you have to remember, these movies say that they're based on true events, and some of these are very lightly based on true events. So anytime that you see a movie that says it's based on true events, and Hollywood takes its own kind of thing, it'll take something and twist it and turn it into the story that they want to tell, and not exactly the real story, but they'll add parts in, they'll add characters in, they'll take characters out, depending on test audiences and things along those lines. It's a very complicated process. And sometimes they'll take something from like the screenwriters that are turning it into a play or a actual movie. They'll take some experiences that happen to them or things along those lines to actually use in those types of movies. So that's something else to keep in mind. And if you're somebody that has only seen the movie and you don't actually know the real history behind the Conjuring house, then this could be where it gets a little bit confusing, or a lot confusing to people, because movies do take a lot of liberties in that regard. But before the Conjuring house, though, I will say this: before it's thrusted into the limelight, the home was a simple farmhouse in the countryside of Harrisville, Rhode Island, that was originally known as the Arnold Estate, built in 1736. So it's a very old house, for those of you guys that didn't know that. A lot of people think 1800s. It's even older than that. It was built in the 1700s. Interestingly, though, whenever the parents would arrive on that very first day, that's when they would claim that they would have the first hauntings and paranormal activity at this particular house, the Conjuring house, as we all come to know and everything. Caroline and Roger Perrin lived in the home with their 5 daughters during the 70s, but their time in the house was memorable for all the wrong reasons, and as we know from the movies, that's why. So they said almost immediately after moving in, the alleged occurrences began. And if you actually watch the movie, they do include this. One of the little girls actually starts seeing things and starts interacting with people. And people can say, well, kids have an overactive like imagination, and that, oh, this little girl was just imagining this person. And skeptics have debunked this as, well, it's just an imaginary friend of the little girl. There was nobody actually there. Well, you can be the judge of that. And yes, kids do have a like wild imagination, but kids are also more honest, because if you think about it, you know, if the mom of a child says something and says, how does this look? Well, you look fat, Mom. That's exactly what the kid is going to say. And yeah, they do kind of tend to exaggerate things, but they're also going to tell you the truth about what happened a lot of the time, though, too. But a lot of parents just try to ignore that type of stuff. But something to keep in mind, especially with this particular case. Now, Caroline would eventually conduct her own research on the property, trying to uncover the cause of the unexplained activity that was now tormenting the family. She would form her own conclusions, and the combustion of her claims and research would lead to a couple of known for their work for just these type of experiences. Yes, I'm talking about Ed and Lorraine Warren. They would enter the scene believing the activity had increased in severity and had become so malevolent, the parent family decided it was time to call on those experts. Now, today, the Conjuring franchise is one of Hollywood's most successful horror movie franchises. However, its popularity has grown. So have the claims that the Warrens were not the renowned paranormal investigators they claimed to be. In fact, many now believe the duo were con artists, and their whole careers were based completely on fraud. So they were exploiting those who came to them for help and with what they believed to be poltergeist activity. And this is where people get a little bit confused here as well. Is that even if Ed and Lorraine Warren were, you know, fraudsters, con artists, and things along those lines, and I can't make that claim. I never met them. There's a lot of different cases and stuff that they went to, and you could form like your own conclusion. But unless if you were really there, you really don't know. And I don't know of any instances though of where the family just came out and said, "Well, no, that didn't happen," or "This was an outright black or white lie," or this or that. I mean, if you guys know about those, leave those in the comments down below, because I would love to hear from you guys if you actually know, and be sure to cite the source on that as well. Now, so they have been, this is where they get really controversial though too, because they were the people that, this is where the movie kind of sways things too, because it changes, and a lot of people who've seen the movies didn't actually read the actual case files. Again, they change, so it's kind of hard to determine what people are really thinking here. But the story of the Conjuring house has been shrouded in controversy, and the accurate details of the accounts of what truly happened in the infamous home have been kind of just wishy-washy. And there's people that's tried to dig into this and stuff though, but again, unless if you were actually there, it's really hard to tell. Now, the Conjuring film, inspired by the accounts of the parent family and retold by Andrea Perry, the oldest daughter, and her trilogy of books, House of Darkness, House of Light. And it's also important to note that Andrea's books are largely based on the mother Caroline's research. They included talking to locals and validating their accounts via psychics. And Caroline believed that at least a dozen mysterious deaths occurred on the property. She claimed that a female demon was responsible for the deaths and even influenced the spirit's malevolent behavior. In an interview, she noted whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be the mistress of the house. She resented the competition, and her mother was, she was perceived as, Caroline was perceived as a threat to what was happening in that house. So there is some things that continue to happen here and stuff though. But if you watch actual interviews with Caroline Parent, she actually does open interviews about this. And she actually says what happened in that house, and it's very on par with what Ed Warren said. And again, it just goes back to people who try to disclaim this stuff weren't actually there. And making this video today, I'm not saying that the Warrens were liars, but people do tend to over-exaggerate things. But as a paranormal investigator myself, it's really hard to say if it's over-exaggerated. And they did this at a time to where it was considered really, being a paranormal investigator now is considered the cool thing to do. Back then, it was considered that you were like a nut job back then. And people still look at paranormal investigators that way today. Don't get me wrong, believe me, I know. But people also, these days, are a little bit more open-minded about stuff. So, within a few months of experiencing the alleged activity, Caroline began researching out to paranormal investigators. So they were trying to find some people here, and this keeps going around, but ultimately receiving varied results. One group claimed to have witnessed the phenomenon experienced by the parents. They even claimed to have communicated with some of the spirits on the property. And they included a child that would believe the older woman was a demented spirit. Now, here is debunking the occult, and this, I'm going to read you guys, this came straight from things about these skeptics and these people who really don't believe in this stuff and the things along these lines, or people who just think the whole thing was a fraud and a big, like, huge money grab. And it might have been, but I'm going to read this to you guys on debunking the occult here, and tell me what you think. The Warrens were no stranger to these types of practices. They performed in order to lend credibility to their accounts, but well-respected skeptics did not buy into their antics, debunking the bulk of their work as exaggerated or exploitative. The Amityville Horror was one such case where it was found the accounts were intentionally fabricated for profit and fame, and it wasn't the only infamous case that would eventually be exposed. In 2023, Netflix released a documentary titled The Devil on Trial, which centered on the fourth film in the franchise, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. The Warrens were depicted as swindlers who preyed on vulnerable families. They combined extraordinary tales with prodigious science to create the narratives used to sell their stories, and Netflix wasn't the only media source to burst the Conjuring bubble. Now, this is something, though, too. Anybody can make anything to contradict something. I could say that I like waffles, and you could, and then somebody, I could put that out on Facebook, and somebody would come back and be like, you know what, F you and F waffles. Pancakes are a lot better, man. Or, you're a liar because waffles ain't that good. You got to keep that stuff in mind, though, guys. There's a lot of things that people can say. Now, I spoke about this earlier in the video, the real Bathsheba. Caroline's research brought her to a woman named Bathsheba Sherman, who, according to local lore, had a dark reputation. Allegedly, Bathsheba is said to have killed an infant, potentially her own, with a knitting needle. She was later acquitted due to the lack of evidence. Additional claims included bluntly against farmhands, as well as the drowning of one of her children. It all ended with Bathsheba supposedly hung herself in the attic of the home. Local lore painted her as a witch who practiced dark magic and worshipped the devil. The historical information available offers an alternate, though. More accurate description, Bathsheba Sherman was a real individual who lived in the 19th century Rhode Island. However, according to the Burville Gazette, she actually died at the age of 73 following a sudden paralysis, commonly known back then as a stroke. As for her children, information for only one, her son, Herbert L. Sherman, could be found via government census records, showing that he lived a long life as a farmer in that area. According to Andrea's book, Caroline Parent claimed to have received much of her information about Bathsheba from a local historian named Mr. McKerchin. To date, however, researchers have yet to find any evidence of the case or trial involving Bathsheba, much less the existence of local historian by that name. Now, there is some things to be said about this as well. Anything can be covered up, and they didn't really keep very accurate records back then, because you're talking about the 1700s, and believe me, guys, I mean, going back to even my grandfather, and he had a twin brother, but even trying to find, like, their birth certificates and stuff, like, calling around to all these places that kept all these records and everything, was incredibly difficult, and it really is incredibly difficult. So, with that being said, what skeptics had discovered doing their own research, though, was that Bathsheba was a lifelong member of the local Baptist church. Her ministry oversaw her funeral, and two highly unlikely events had she been a devil-worshipping witch, as Caroline had claimed that she was. So, she was somebody that went to church on the regular and had a very good relationship with her church family. Not saying that she couldn't have been a fraud and things along those lines, but the evidence on that side does kind of point the other direction, and she never lived in the infamous house like the claims have been. Now, perhaps the most exploratory evidence was that Bathsheba never lived at the Perrin farmhouse. She resided on the Sherman farm, which was quite a ways away, but all the accounts Bathsheba was an ordinary, hard-working citizen. It was Andrea Perrin and the Warrens that pushed the false, gruesome legacy that made Bathsheba a ghostly villain in The Conjuring, making her yet another victim in this tangled web of lies. At least that's according to investigators and according to skeptics that have actually dug into this for themselves. I'm not saying this, guys. This stuff is coming right from their mouths. Do your own research. I've always told people this with anything. Before you conclude anything, do your own research, especially when it comes to paranormal, because when you get out there and do these investigations on your own, and stuff may happen, it may not happen. And that's the thing about being paranormal like investigator. It may happen, it may not happen, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't happen, that still does not mean that there's nothing there. It just doesn't want to reveal itself to you at that point. Because believe me, there's stuff out there and you can feel it and sense it and you know it's there. And that is just one example though, guys. Now, unveiling the Warrens' claims. Now, the big thing behind this though, with the mounting evidence that disputes the valid points of the Warrens. Now, it's hard to determine if the Perrin family home was ever truly haunted. A respected skeptic and researcher took an exclusive look into the claims by the Perrins and Warrens and came to the following conclusion in the 2016 article for the Skeptical Inquirer. In it, he states, I analyzed the Perrins' claims of demonic activity and shows that they were consistent with the effects of strong winds, misinterpretation, squirrel girl pranks, vivid dreams, simple suggestion, role-playing, and other factors, including one child having an imaginary playmate, and the effects of memory after 30 to 40 years, claiming that they weren't remembering this the proper way. Now, further, he picked apart selected passages from the Perrins' books, providing explanations for the phenomenon they claimed to have experienced. And his discoveries went beyond the paranormal, uncovered a dysfunctional dynamic within the Perrin family, finding that Roger and Caroline were on the verge of separation that eventually ended in divorce. And they did end up getting eventually divorced. Now, here is something about this, though, too. People always want to contribute paranormal activity and demonic activity to things that seem like they are normal, and these things happen every day. But I will say this, though, guys. At the end of the day, it may seem that way, but there could still be something there. And the strong odors, things, I mean, you know, in the case of, like, Lidley Street, whenever they said an entire TV set, like, flew across the room. Now, they claim the child did that. I don't think so. So, there's things like that that you got to keep in mind as well whenever it comes to this stuff. Some stuff can't be explained because it actually is the work of paranormal and demonic forces, and you just don't realize it at the time. And you can be the most skeptic person in the world, and even if it's happening in front of somebody's eyes, they will deny it and say that there's a logical explanation for this. So, just keep that in mind. The skeptic also went on, though, that there were no deaths found that Caroline claimed to have occurred on the property. Aside from Bathsheba's incorrectly attributed death, could find no evidence or recorded of the alleged murdered infant. His investigation also included talking to former owners and who also lived on the property from 1987 to 2019. The only issues they experienced were with the living, as the release of the Conjuring film prompted trespassers and vandals to frequent the home. And it should be noted that in 2019, a couple who purchased the house for $439,000 claimed to have experienced all manner of demonic activity. However, some speculate that they may have capitalized on the property in the film's famous, making this house super famous, as it went on to sell the home in 2022 for $1.5 million to Boston developer. Now, according to reports by the Boston Globe and various interviews, the house doesn't allow people to live there year-round because the energy is so powerful there. Now, this is something, though, too, that the energy is so powerful there, and yet this is being put out by the Boston Globe, but yet there's a skeptical writer for something else that's trying to disclaim this. And whichever side that you decide to believe on this, though, guys, it's important to do your own research, because anybody can do hearsay and this and that and everything back and forth. But the only thing I will say, though, too, is that the event of this, though, too, demonic activity and spiritual activity does not always stay, it doesn't reveal itself to everybody. And you are chosen by God to be used in certain aspects to show that faith can overcome anything, including demons and demonic things and paranormal, and having faith is key. And I will say this, though, that this is a big thing that people seem to overlook, is the fact that God uses us in certain ways, and He shows people that anybody can be used, and anybody can be used for his purpose. You just have to have enough faith, and you have to go there. And if you have not read the book of Job, look it up. That man had extreme faith all the way, loses everything and still chooses to walk with God. And that's the way that we all should be. And I have to throw that in there because your faith in God is the only thing that gives you protection from demonic forces. And I'm saying this, even if you think the Warrens cases were exaggerated, you cannot deny that there's evil in this world, and you cannot deny that you see it every day in some form or another. So just keep that in mind as we continue on and we finish up here talking about this and everything. Keep all this in mind, though, guys. I had to put this point in here just because I wanted you guys to understand this, that faith is the ultimate. You just have to have faith. Everybody wants facts. What you need is faith. You need to be willing to take a leap of faith in anything that you do and believe in yourself and in God. Most importantly, God. But you also need to believe in yourself and life, and you can accomplish anything. And I'm not saying that you're going to be a multimillionaire and billionaire, but God can use you, and God can make you be all that you can be, and He can use you for His purpose, and that is the ultimate purpose. Whether it be in this sense or something else. And that's what He used the parent family for, though, too, to show you that there's evil out there, though. Keep this in mind, though, too, guys. The devil today is he's revealing himself more and more because he knows his reign here on earth is coming to an end here very, very soon. So the more he reveals himself, the shorter his reign is going to be from then on out. So just keep that in mind. And it's important that you make the right decision now, so whenever that time comes, and let God use you for His purpose, which is a much bigger purpose than what you think your purpose in life actually is. Now, these are important facts to consider. The hauntings were either exaggerated or fabricated by the parent family for financial gain. Of course, the events captured on film, and they were heightened for theoretical effect. And with paranormal enthusiasts pointing out the film adds a demonic possession subplot that was not part of the original story, but that was the extent of the alleged activity the parent family experienced. Could they have taken some strange occurrences and turned them into a horror story for the ages, with Hollywood adding the final touches? The parents have denied Conjuring this story for profit. Now, they deny writing The Conjuring and doing all this stuff for profit. But Andrea certainly made a sizable amount of money from her books. Andrea Perron's books have no publisher standing, which could be a sign her story lacks evidence. It's not uncommon for publishers to use extreme caution while working with non-fiction manuscripts as to avoid, legal ramifications, lawsuits. Everybody wants to sue everybody these days. There are some that will take out multi-billion-dollar insurance policies in the event a book is subject to lawsuits based on libel or defamation. It is suspected Andrea was unable to secure publishing for her books, reinforcing the theory that their story is based on tall tales of the Warrens' need for notoriety. Now, keep in mind, everything I'm saying here, a lot of this stuff is stuff that a skeptic said. I'm not actually saying this. I'm telling you what these skeptics have actually dug up themselves, or they say they dug up themselves. They could be lying for all I know. So just keep that in mind as well. Now, the lasting legacy of The Conjuring, and this is where we're going to end today. Though the evidence continues to mount against the being valid of the Conjuring house and its hauntings, many still believe the story is perpetrated by the Warrens estate and ghost hunters who conducted the investigations of the home. It's not surprising, though, as many continue to believe the Amityville horror is true, even though extensive investigations and numerous legal disputes have proven otherwise. Now, here's the thing about proving something otherwise. You're never going to be able to prove it like one way or another. I mean, it's easy enough to walk into a place and say, if you're here, reveal yourself in the name of Jesus Christ. Well, when nothing reveals itself, then that doesn't mean that there's nothing there. I mean, or there may not be something there in the future, I should say. It means there's nothing there at that particular moment. But when we exhibit fear and certain energy, we put off that psychic energy, and that energy attracts things to us, like poltergeist activity. And that's just stuff to keep in mind, though, guys, as we continue and we finish up in today's video. Always be mindful, and this is why it's so important, again, to have faith. Parents have maintained their story, and though Lorraine claimed that the demons in the home were dangerous, it should be noted that the parents continued to live in the home for 9 years after the events. And a lot of people do this with these haunted houses and things with demonic activity, even after an exorcist and stuff has come out, because they just don't have the money to move. Think about how expensive moving is. Think about how expensive moving is today. Now, guys, I will say this, though. At the end of the day, it is controversial. The Conjuring house is a hotspot for paranormal investigations. And like I said at the beginning of the video, though, it is coming up for sale. It is a house that will always be infamous, regardless if this story was partially fabricated, all the way fabricated or not. It will forever live on in the Conjuring universe and those movies that we all come to enjoy. And we all just really need to understand, though, something, though, as well, that do your research and make sure that you are checking on this stuff for yourself. Don't believe everything that you hear. And, you know, even if I'm the one telling you, or somebody that you think you can really trust, or your family members or your parents are telling you, always do your own research, make your own decisions, make your own conclusions. Too many people don't think for themselves these days, and that's a big problem. You follow the group, don't follow the group. Be an individual thinker, follow yourself, follow the evidence, though, guys, and always stay safe if you're going to be out there doing paranormal investigations. And if not, the world is getting to be a crazier and dangerous place. Even if you're not going into places like this, it's still going to be it's still a crazy world out there, and it's becoming a more dangerous world by the day. God bless each and every one of you guys. Thank you for watching today's video. We're going to be hitting the trail here very soon, getting back out there on these paranormal investigations, and we will have evidence, and we will not fabricate anything, because that's not the way a proper investigation is done, and a proper investigator does their investigations. I'm not saying it was fabricated, but you have to look at both sides of everything. Once again, guys, God bless each and every one of you, and we will catch you guys down.